me take this time. So shine my light, shine the light, shine the light.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to The Light, episode number 5 of Leadership Diaries. We are really blessed and honored to have our guest today. Guests that Thabani and I both look up to. Guests who have had quite a great and positive, contribution in our journeys. And, it's going to be a fantastic day where you're going to learn a lot. So please ensure that you've got a pen and paper, that you've opened up your mind to some great content, stuff that's going to help you grow, not just from a work perspective, but even in your personal journeys. So we have fantastic guests today. We've got Letepu. We also have Zaid, people that we've we've grown really fond of in the last 5 to 10 years in our journeys. People that we look up to from a work perspective, and also in our private space as well. People that we go to for advice. So you're in for a fantastic hour of great content. Thabani?
And I'm generally never nervous about these things, but today I think the caliber, not that obviously we've had so many quality guests that we've had, but people that, I've worked really closely in the same environment with and looking up to, has a bit of a different feel,
Right.
I think, to it versus generally and versus normally. But really excited, I think, to have the conversations. Generally how we like to start the show is to have our guests just introduce themselves, and then we will introduce you, and you can see, and then we'll see if there are any differences versus how you introduce yourself and versus how we introduce you. And I'd like to start with Letepu.
Super. Thank you. My name is Letepu Machaba. I am a mom to a 6-year-old six-year-old girl. I'm a road runner, do marathons, and at the moment I am head of a division for Africa, and Africa is in my soul. Africa is in my spirit. I'm proudly African. And I think that's really who I'd like to introduce myself as. I won't go into my CV or where I've been. So if you ask me, that's really how I identify myself. Proudly African, and trying to do as much as I can to unlock opportunity and help rewrite Africa's narrative. So that's what I actually live for.
So I will introduce Letepu. She's mentioned the bit about being a runner. I think she's done 4 comrades, which she doesn't mention. But Letepu, holds a BSc degree from Rhodes University, and she's one of those rare people who've experienced, I think, pre-apartheid and post-apartheid, which adds a bit of a diverse sort of view. She holds a diverse view in terms of how South Africa is and how privileged, I guess, some of us are, because she's seen what the other side looks like. She started her career at Unilever, and she's done multiple roles, including international assignments. The one that was also interesting was around now she's done she did a secondment in the International Marketing Committee, where she basically helped shape more like the narrative or the brand of South Africa to the world. The other massive role that she did is where she headed up the operations for the World Cup 2010, where it was about obviously just getting us, the South Africans, and the rest of the world excited about the World Cup. And then she opened up her own marketing and strategy consultancy, where she consulted with a number of blue chip companies, as well as obviously some government ministries, etc., and then made the big U-turn to Unilever as a marketing director for personal care. And then where she held that for a few years, and then she moved on to becoming the vice president for home care. That's the category she's talking about for Southern Africa. And currently now she holds the role of Vice President for Home Care for Africa. And that is the Letsepo that sits by me today.
Great, Tabanya. Everything that I was trying
To not talk about it.
my CV, yeah, but I was trying to say who I am.
No,
yeah.
no, definitely.
Yeah.
I think we find that it's important that we generally you hold the human element of it into as introducing yourself. And for us, I think it's also important that the audience actually understands in terms of some of the achievements that you've made, because that just gives them a view in terms of why we hold you also in such high regard, because you have that balance between the human part of it as an individual, but also from a corporate perspective in terms of all the things that you've achieved. Yeah.
Yeah, no.
Zaid, please tell everybody who you are.
Thank you, Michael. So I'm Zaid Abrahams. Zaid means companion in Arabic, and I'd like to see myself as companion to everyone here. And also, hopefully when we meet in certain circumstances, we will create that relationship. I see myself in terms of what is my role in the world as really helping to contribute, enable others to reach their purpose, their dreams. And sometimes our collective experiences can help us do that. I'm from a community that I'm very proud of called Sydenham in Durban. So I'm colored fully. I'm Muslim. I've got a renewed spiritual sense. To get my rocks off, I love bungee jumping because it takes me out of my comfort zone on a number of levels. I think also I'm very passionate about not just people development, but helping people through things that we've kind of encountered in our lives in a different form, but also knowing that there's so many different generations going on. Like we all have different points of view on certain things. So very passionate about that. And probably one of my new purpose passion points is, I would call it inclusion. And what does that actually mean in our personal lives before we even talk about the workplace? Yeah. So that's me, the Sydenham boy who thinks he's international, big city boy now.
So Zaid is a city slicker as well as an African at the true heart of it. Very warm person who has really shaped the career of many people. When we asked people that you've worked with, people that have been part of your team, some of the things that they've said, because I think Zaid is probably, out of all the episodes, he's probably introduced himself with a lot more background in terms of who he is, what your purpose is. Whereas we found that many other people have just given us a two-liner. I'm Michael Lebona, I work here, and this is what I've done in a very short space. So I appreciate that because what that also says is it also speaks to who you are and you know what your why is. And it's important as an audience that you also know what your why is. What is your purpose? Why do you do what you do? And what we're going to unlock today is their journeys and why they've achieved the big things that they've done thus far. So Zaid, he introduced himself. I'm just going to say a couple of things because Zaid has done so many things. It was so difficult to try and remember everything. But Zaid loves traveling. He loves music. He loves dogs as well. We're happy to take our dogs to the same vet. He's got a husky. So he's an animal lover. Zaid has his career spanned over 20 years in the marketing space, where he's worked for various multinationals, from FMCG to luxury to the financial institutions. So his experience vast across different sectors, which is what has helped and shaped him to be a well-rounded marketer. Not only working in South Africa, he's got regional experience as well as international experience, where he's worked in London, he's worked in Turkey, in different roles. Similar to Letsepo as well, he's also an entrepreneur. And you'll find that a lot of the people that we'll talk to have both an entrepreneurial spirit, but also a very corporate journey as well. So Zaid, as an entrepreneur, he opened up a consultancy called Zinc Consulting, and he's talked about his purpose very briefly. But his purpose is to grow people as well as transformation, which is at the heart of who he is and what he does. My first encounter with Zaid was working for Coca-Cola. So when I was at ABI at Coca-Cola, Zaid was head of sparkling beverages. And sparkling beverages, probably about 80% of the Coca-Cola business.
95%.
My apologies. 95%. Maybe it was 80 then. And that shows you how significant that role was,
Yeah.
within the business, and how he shaped, that role. Because it was, at the time, Coca-Cola was under tremendous pressure in terms of, the core benefits and the intrinsics of the brand. And you came at a very pivotal time, and he shaped, that department and the teams. I've also realized that people with an MBA will often tell you they have an MBA.
Correct.
Not Zaid. Zaid has an MBA, and what's quite interesting when I read this is part of his research was developing a blueprint for racial diversity transformation, which has also been delivered to associations, corporates, and is presented at the Disruptor Durban and Cape Town. And that comes back to his purpose. So you'll find that everything that he does
He links
speaks
it to
his
that.
purpose. So it is really an honor and a pleasure to welcome Letepu as well as Zaid to today. So I'm just going to take a short amount of time just to tell you the people that you've worked with, the impact that you've made in their lives.
Thank you.
So please just sit back and listen. So Zaid is approachable, he's relentless, very intelligent, extremely passionate. He's our very own Che Guevara. He's all about changing the world. He's authentic in his leadership. He is extremely self-possessed. There's an eternal, drive and a fire that sparks within him. And within that, he also has the ability to show vulnerability, which is something that a lot of leaders don't. A lot of leaders want to show you they're strong at all times, that they don't make mistakes. But Zaid is quite the opposite. Very high EQ. He expects nothing but the best from the people that work with him and work for him. He dislikes common. Common is something that he dislikes. He continuously pushes boundaries at all times in every area. And he hates the status quo. Zaid drives and inspires you to push beyond not just the boundaries of the organization, but also beyond your personal boundaries as well. He's quick to give people an opportunity and quick to illuminate potential. So you have leaders who are able to groom, you have leaders who are able to find talent, and not only is he able to spot it, but is also able to nurture it. And even at times when there's no benefit for it, when there's people in different teams, in different organizations, people that have worked with you, this is what they say. When he believes in you, he fully supports you, and he gives you such trust. He believes and he trusts in your abilities. And as a result, he'll let you run without harnessing you, telling you what to do or how to do it. He's just there to guide you through the process. Zaid has taught me that leadership is not a behavior, but it's a calling. And that is how people have described you, Zaid.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to say about that?
No, it's humbling. I'm sorry. Thanks.
I would say I agree with that.
You agree with that
Yes,
feedback?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Letepu was my boss. In some
Those are
aspects,
the
she's still my
things we
boss.
talk about.
So obviously, I did exactly the same thing in terms of asking about Letepu, really getting feedback from different people.
You guys.
We have to do this. And the feedback was so consistent. And so I won't repeat the stuff that they've mentioned about Zaid because there were some similarities from there. But they spoke about a quiet, humble soul. Asked a lot of questions. She's very fact-based. So the emotional aspect of it, she really tries to get to the core of the issue. There's an understated force about her. That's one of the things that was said. A leader with a heart. Empowering and supportive management style. Very inspirational leader. And I don't usually do this, but I wanted to just read an excerpt from one of the comments because it really spoke to me. And I completely agree with it because that's what I've seen myself working with you. Letepu represents an inspirational ideal. Her ability to lead from the back and allowing others to shine whilst challenging them to look at things differently resonates with me professionally and personally. if I could liken Letepu to a phrase in the dictionary, it would certainly be a role model. Not only because of her gender and race, which are both very important factors in the South African marketing corporate industry, but also because she is worthy of imitation.
Wow.
And generally, when we ask people for for feedback, we'll get about like a small excerpt or 3 words or 4 words. But I think for both of you, when we ask for feedback, people couldn't say enough. If we showed you, it's like pages and pages of feedback.
Absolutely.
From each and every, and some of them were surprising for me because we tried to be as diverse as possible so that it's not just similar people to get the feedback. And the feedback is consistent
Yeah.
and it's the same.
Yeah.
And even afterwards, we're like, is that enough? Because there's more that I could say, and we're like, no, that's fine. That's enough, So I don't know how you feel
Wow.
about that.
Can I drink
feedback.
water?
Can I add to that feedback, Letepo?
Just wanted to just carry on drinking water the whole
Go
afternoon.
ahead. Letepo's a leader that I respect a lot. I've learned a lot from. But Letepo's one who doesn't see ceilings. We call glass ceilings barriers and that. No, it's carving the way, setting that direction and unlocking those things for herself and the teams. And that's really, something that I would add to that feedback set. Wow.
I appreciate that. I'll take it in. I'm also humbled, so I won't say more.
There's a statement that was shared with me by someone that apparently you use, which is around you don't praise fish for swimming, which I love, and I wanted you to understand, from your perspective in terms of how did that come about, and what generally do you mean by that particular statement?
That's a very interesting one, isn't it?
Yes.
It's twofold. The first part is the generational piece, and I think going through this journey, personally and in a work front, you recognize that now there's a blend in the workforce of older generation and a younger generation.
Sure.
And we relate very differently to feedback, etc. We were the generation, and I'm not saying that's right, but we were the generation that got feedback, your PDP, once a year. So it was like an annual PDP. It's like the moment that you get ready for. This generation is not like that. They're used to likes. That's what they live for. So they want feedback immediately, even feedback about things that they're actually supposed to be doing. So, and that's actually what I mean. Don't come and tell me. So I can't congratulate a fish for swimming. So I can't praise you for doing what you're actually supposed to be doing in the first place. Then you congratulate when there's just something exceptional to then raise the bar. That's really what it's all about. It was more generational, and then secondly was more, let's raise the bar and not just be comfortable that this has been done. That's your job in the first place.
And where does it come from? I mean, is it something that you were born with, or is it something that was shaped in you through your growth? I mean, where does it come from, this? Because I also find that generally people who try to raise the standard are usually the ones, there's something that has driven that and it's built that. Some of it is over time, some of them there's pivotal moments that have done that.
Yeah. I'll share where it actually comes from, and I'm not saying it's necessarily the right or wrong, just my own personal story. I think growing up in South Africa and where we've been, you grow up, how do I explain it now? You grow up as a black female, being in an environment where you're not always trusted to go one step further. So there's that one piece to it. And I think there's also a piece, I remember personally, when I started my BSc degree at Rhodes University, I mean, I was so proud. I made it, I got the grades. Here I am at this university, super proud. And the first day, part of orientation, I was in a lab with a whole lot of other students in it. And there was this professor with a clipboard going from student to student, having a small conversation. And then he came to me. The question, and remember, I'm part of the older generation, so I went to Rhodes University while apartheid was still legal. So it was that era and that time, and there were quotas in terms of how many Black people you could take in. Prof came to me, and then his question was, "What are you doing here?" And I took it literally rather. And I said, I'm doing my science degree, biochemistry. I'm so proud to be. I was genuinely happy. And then he said, but have you considered social sciences?
Wow.
And then his exact words were, people like you
Wow.
never make it. So that was quite direct. People like you never make it in this field. So social sciences is what I would recommend. I remember my heart sank to my stomach. I just couldn't believe it. And perhaps that was just the journey. It was a painful journey. So if you think about it, when you're at varsity or at college, first time, it's about sex, drugs, and alcohol.
Correct.
Which is perhaps then the part of me that I didn't get to entertain. I actually literally buried my head in the sand and just worked as much as, because I was told you won't make it. And the only way I knew how was just to graft. And there's the third part to it is that, of course, I feel like I missed out. I was just too serious into books. Life is not about that.
Yeah.
It's some form of work hard, play hard, but I just literally worked very hard. Listen, in retrospect, that painful experience actually shaped me to who I am, because I did finish my science degree. I didn't convert to anything else.
Correct.
And then I proceeded to the roles that I've been. But I won't lie, it did have an impact on how I view life, how I take things forward, and it continued into my journey, and always just being cautious that people like you will never succeed in this role. So people like you, and it continues in corporate South Africa. Let's just face it. Overt racism is gone, but we left with covert racism. So people like you.
Yeah.
So that's maybe where it comes from, the desire to excel, because you probably you're not where you're supposed to be.
Yeah, and I find it, interesting and fascinating that something that happened so long ago, is still with you even today in terms of really pushing for excellence. And Zaid, they spoke to you about no ceiling. Where does that come from? Because I know you grew up, and in terms of really moving up, and I would say you are one of the unicorns, as well, in terms of just looking at where you come from into where you are today. Absolutely. But also everyone talks about, how for you, especially the hard times, how you come out of the hard times and really push forward. What drives that in terms of really you continuously wanting to strive for that excellence?
Sure. I think it's a combination of, like Letepu rightfully reflected, there's something in the background that triggers that and drives the behavior. For me, I come from I'm an introvert, firstly. Okay. Let's just start there.
Okay.
Yes, I'm in marketing, but I'm an introvert that knows how to, some people say ambivert, whatever the label is, it means I get my energy from myself.
Correct.
That's effectively what it means, right? Yeah. But if I go back, I come from a very humble, very religious family. My mom is late. My parents were mixed religion, so Roman Catholic mom, Muslim father, etc. But I think my grandfather was also a renowned community leader, but quite humble. So even when I rebelled, you know, I always had to contextualize my rebellion to say, oh my word, I operate in a bigger universe than in my own head. Right? And that does ground you. So when you say unicorn and that, I'm like, no, there's millions of people who've made it despite, you know, my situations are not as bad as other people's situations, but it's not as great as other people's situations. It's all relative. But that goes right back to, I'm part of a context. I'm not no man is an island. One of my other famous bosses once told me that no man is an island, meaning you can't do anything alone. You are part of a team, a community, a company, whatever, a family, whatever it is, you're not on your own. I think the second thing is I'm government school proudly educated, but the teachers I had so much passion and conviction. This is now at the end of apartheid, just to locate us, high school that is. They provided opportunities out of their own personal passion to go and connect us to Teenagers Against Drug Abuse. I was a Rotary Exchange student. I was on Durban Youth Council, whatever. Those things are not available to government school kids. Today, they're not available. But somehow, those teachers enabled that. They broke through what other people may have perceived as ceilings and made it happen. And I really, really respect and value that to this day. And I think probably the other one going now into adulthood, I probably had a little bit more play in university. I did commerce and law, and I was going to be a lawyer and whatnot. But actually, my first formal job after university was at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which was controversial. To this day, it remains controversial. But it was a role that we played on behalf of not just our country, but the world, to help codify, capture certain things. Whether it was flawless or not is not the point. And that really taught me a different level of humility. It was saying, I'm not entitled to anything. I'm not entitled to the job that I have, but we have to work hard. And that goes to Letepo's point. Work hard comes from the generation I'm born into, where I often say in my corporate roles, I'm first generation boardroom. People misunderstand that by saying, well, what does that mean? Is that an arrogant statement? No, it's not an arrogant statement, it's facts. I'm very proud of my parents. I'm very proud of what they did in the capacities that, you know, but they did the best for their communities, their families, and myself. So we're not actually entitled, but what we can do is say, how do we bring people along with us on the journey? And at the same time, it's been grateful for the opportunities that we may have had exposure to that others have not had exposure to. But to Letepo's point, just to close this, it goes back to some experience that you've had. And last week, somebody asked me, the first time I've been asked this question in 20 years, somebody asked me, are you left and right brain? And I don't know which is which, because I am both. And then they asked me, how long did you know this? I said, from standard 6.
Wow.
A teacher called me and said, I'm going to explain something to you that's going to make no sense, but the sooner you know it, the sooner you'll be able to manage it. That wasn't in the curriculum.
Correct.
The teacher could have just left at 2 o'clock and gone home, but he pulled me aside and he said, let me explain what I've perceived about your left and your right brain story.
Wow.
So that teacher took maybe 10 minutes of his life, but it helped me understand. And, you know, as you grow older, you learn a little bit more about it. And I appreciate that to this day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And I mean, the fact that you've absorbed often I think, and maybe it's our generation or the generation after us, is there's this element of, you know, this destination that everybody's looking at, and, you know, based on just your background in terms of your reality, obviously when you were growing up versus the reality today, you would have been somewhere else. So the question is around just how you keep going, because for some people, you know, they reach a level and then they're like, well, I'm good now. And that's and that's that. Or either they start dropping the standards or something happens, What keeps you consistent and in maintaining the standards, but also just continues to move forward in the way that you guys do it? Because the difference is the big piece around the both of you is the humility part, it's the heart part. You're not just moving up in organizations, but there's that heart part that's in there that really that's what inspires the rest of the people to say they're still human and they're still able to achieve. And for me, that is, I don't know how you do that, because if you're facing all these negative things, some people, they change and it shapes them in the other way, where they become maybe harder and they stop caring about people and it becomes more about themselves. But you guys have been consistently able to continue to, as you move up and with the challenges, to still remain the humble, leading with the heart, authentically yourselves. And so what drives that?
I think for me, Tabani, it's my purpose, my own personal purpose, which is around unlocking opportunity and helping rewrite Africa's narrative. So that's my why. I think on many times we all get challenged in life, in whatever role that you're actually in. I'll be the first to admit I've also been challenged, whether I took a decision in the business that didn't quite work out, and then you have to live with the experience of that. So you do get challenged at some point or the other. But for me, and Zaid mentions first generation thing, the reality, and that is why I made it a point to actually be here today. The reality is my mother was never a vice president. My mother was not even a manager. My mother was a scullery lady at a hotel. So if you want to say that's a sophisticated name for washing dishes. So that's who my mom actually was. So some of these things you're not taught. You have to actually learn. So what drives me, for me, it's no longer about me. So if you ask me and you said Letepo quits, this is the end for you, I'm okay with it. It's about the generation behind me, that they can think it is possible, to actually reach up there. And I love it because this other generation, the revolutionary, the militant, they're hardworking, they're smart, so they'll even go further than where some of us have actually been, so to say. And I remember when I first got appointed in the office, I was quite glib about the role. It was, yes, it was big, but it was it's a job that I have to perform. It's just another chapter. And there's a lady that I always converse with at the coffee station in the office. Bless her, we talk about everything, but we don't have a big conversation. We normally just how the weather, etc. She is not part of the organization, so to say. She's a contractor. So we always just chat after hours because we stay we would stay late. And then she said to me, siyaziqhenya ngawe. And I think to this day I get quite emotional. Because you think, wow, is this what it means, for her? And I mean, she probably, let's face it, she was a cleaner. And she's probably, maybe with time she could get a different role, but that is her role. She doesn't work for the company. But for her, sitting there and seeing someone who looks like her, that's for me was a wake-up moment, that it's no longer about me. So no matter how tough it gets, I can take it now, maybe because I'm grown up now. It's no longer personal. I've learned so much. It's no longer about me. It's about those behind.
Okay. So I think this first generation notion is really saying you don't have somebody to call, WhatsApp, meet necessarily to say, how do you deal with this situation that I find myself in? Have you been in this? Can you help guide me through this? But that's on a surface level. If you look at it properly, yes, you can. I can phone my father and say, this is a situation, and he'll come from a values-based point of view
Yes. Yes.
to dock you back into what your beliefs are, etc. Generationally, we may not agree.
Yeah.
So what you'll find is our parents' generation are likely to say, but can you just not argue and can you just listen to what they are saying?
Yeah.
Which I understand, right? But when you calibrate that, and there's probably about 4 to 5 generations in a lot of corporates right now.
Correct.
There's Gen Z right up to beyond boomers and whatnot. We all have a different point of view. It's about understanding that point of view and then working, how do you best unlock it?
Yeah.
Me, honestly, Gen, whatever I am, I'm in my 40s, we still are risk averse because we don't come from having everything, right? So therefore, there's a risk aversion and that fear of, I could lose my job, right? I could, all of those situations. Millennials don't have that. Gen Z definitely doesn't have that. But if I take it back to me, it's really about saying, if you are docking yourself back to, it's difficult to talk about your values, but human values that are important. You should be fine to navigate, whatever situation it is. And to Letepo's point, I think a few years ago, I also, in a different way, got to a point of saying, there's certain people that are in my teams or that I know are not at the level that I may have been at, but I would love to be in their team one day. And that was a big shift for me. It was saying, there are people that I would like to continue supporting. And actually, I spoke to you earlier, I have reverse mentors from some of those people. Like they mentor me, and yet they would have been in my team at some point. And I love that because that for me is what I mean by enabling others. It's saying, I'm not necessarily going to be able to perform every role that I may have dreamed about 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but I certainly would like to help people achieve their kind of dreams. And the last point I'd make on this is ego. So there have been some career decisions I've made. When I look at it in hindsight, I'm like, wow, that was a ego decision, right? Most of my career decisions have been about life. It literally mirrors my life. When I was married, those are the career decisions I made. When I was divorced, those are the career decisions I've made. But there's one or two when it's literally about ego. And for me now in my 40s, and I know for the youngsters, it's like, oh, this old guy. I've been there. I also used to look at those people and think, they don't really know what I'm going through. That's okay. I guess the point is one day, you hopefully will reflect on some of these conversations that you've picked up and it will make sense in that context. But the sooner ego gets out of your decision making, the clearer things become. It's not about you.
Now that you've enjoyed episode number 5 of the Light Leadership Diaries, please be sure to subscribe right here. And after you subscribe, Tabani, what should they do?
Hit the bell notification so that every time we upload a new episode, you get the communication.
And then if you really enjoy the content, make sure that you like it and you share it with your friends in your community.
And more importantly, make sure that you comment with any views or feedback or even some proposals or new information that you may want to have.
Who's that?